It's good to be prepared. You never know how a big decision will turn out, so you need to be ready for anything. This is especially true whether you have to announce a victory or a tragedy to the world. You want to have a speech ready so you don't resort to freestyle rapping your way through a declaration of war. Fate dictated that these speeches were not to be given, but they would have been well remembered if they had. Number 10. Wamsutta James ruins Plymouth's anniversary party. Native American activist Wamsutta James was a descendant of the Wampanoags, a tribe that was living in New England when European maps were still labeling America with "Here be dragons." When he was asked to give a speech at a 1970 event commemorating the anniversary of the arrival of settlers at Plymouth, he saw a chance to rip apart historical myths that glossed over how natives were treated by settlers. Instead of telling the school kids and Pilgrim descendants present what they were expecting to hear, cute fictions about how buddy-buddy the Pilgrims and natives were, he would have spent his entire speech destroying those myths, taking his audience to task for their ignorance and highlighting the many atrocities his people suffered, after which he presumably would have dropped the mic and strutted off stage. Event organizers didn't like his proposed text, surprise, and he didn't like their requests for a rewrite, so James never spoke. While not as historically significant as some of the other speeches we're about to look at, we think this is worth mentioning because it highlights an area of American history that is woefully overlooked. It's fittingly ironic that a speech meant to discuss an oft-suppressed historical truth was prevented from being given. Also, we've come to admire the giant balls that it takes to accept an invitation to speak at an event and then spend your whole time trashing it. And here's an excerpt. "We forfeited our country. Our lands have fallen into the hands of the aggressor. We have allowed the white men to keep us on our knees. What has happened cannot be changed, but today we must work towards a more humane America, a more Indian America, where men and nature once again are important, where the Indian values of honor, truth, and brotherhood prevail." Number 9. Sarah Palin wins. Near the end of the 2008 presidential election, tensions between the McCain and Palin camps were so high that McCain's people insisted that win or lose, Sarah Palin would not give a speech on election night. Given that Palin had turned into the laughingstock of the campaign, this was probably a wise decision. Palin was a divisive figure both during and after the election, with some voters loving her and others cringing at the thought of her being a heartbeat away from the presidency. When the text of Palin's proposed victory speech was revealed, it was a look into what could have been, but thankfully wasn't. As a speech, it's decent enough, your typical gracious victory celebration, but it's the idea behind it that's really interesting. The 2008 election was one of the closest and most contentious in recent history, and the years that followed it would have looked awfully different had the results swung the other way. Regardless of your political beliefs, it's a hell of a thought experiment to take a minute and wonder what America would have looked like with Sarah Palin in the White House. And, well, her speech lets you know how that news would have been broken to you. Here's an excerpt. "It's been just 68 days since that afternoon in Dayton, Ohio, when Senator McCain introduced me as his running mate. He is truly the maverick. He took a chance on me. I will always be grateful for that. It will be the honor of a lifetime to work with him as Vice President of the United States. And I pledge to govern with integrity and goodwill and clear conviction and a servant's heart. My fellow Americans, tens of millions of you shared our convictions and gave us your votes. And I thank you for your confidence. We were facing tough odds and formidable opponents." Number 8. Albert Luthuli lectures the court. Albert Luthuli was a key member of the African National Congress in their struggle against South Africa's apartheid government. He was arrested in 1960 for burning his pass, an internal passport that all black South Africans were required to carry and produce on demand. Shortly after, 69 people were killed in a protest against the pass system. Luthuli was found guilty, fined, and given a suspended jail sentence. He had planned on giving a speech before the sentence was decided, but ultimately refrained for health reasons. While today the trial is little more than a footnote in the long story of the anti-apartheid movement, his proposed speech is an excellent piece of rhetoric that aptly highlights the many grievances blacks had with the system. If Luthuli had been able to give it, it may well have been remembered alongside other famous protest speeches of the era. And here's an excerpt. "There comes a time, sir, when a leader must give as practical a demonstration of his convictions and willingness to live up to the demands of the cause as that he expects of his people. I felt that was the hour in our history and in my life for this demonstration. I'm not sorry nor ashamed of what I did. I could not have done less than I did and still live with my conscience. I would rightly lose the confidence of my people and earn the disrespect of right-thinking people in my country and in the world, and the disdain of posterity. In all humility I say that I acted, as was my duty in response to the highest moral law, in the best interest of the people of South Africa, because I am convinced that the urgent need of our country for the maintenance of peace and harmony amongst the various races, black and white, is the immediate and wholesale abolition of the pass. It is my firm belief that it is the duty of all right-thinking people, black and white, who have the true interest of our country at heart, to strive for this without flinching. Number 7. JFK's Dallas speech. What you may not know is that Kennedy was on his way to the Dallas Trade Mart where he was scheduled to give a speech. His speech touches on the Cold War, America's role in the world, and the general uneasiness of the times. Ironically, parts of the speech attack speaking itself. Kennedy argues that America needs to act against communism instead of merely criticizing it. Some of his words are quite ominous, promoting financial support for the Vietnam War and the oppressive Iranian Shah. It does not look wise in retrospect, and bragging about how the US has been able to vastly expand its nuclear arsenal is just flat out scary. Nevertheless, it's a stirring piece of rhetoric that would have done well in the hands of a skilled orator like Kennedy, and certainly would have been remembered as a snapshot of the times in which he governed had he lived to deliver it. And here's an excerpt. We, in this country, in this generation, are, by destiny rather than choice, the watchmen on the walls of world freedom. We ask, therefore, that we may be worthy of our power and responsibility, that we may exercise our strength with wisdom and restraint, and that we may achieve, in our time and for all time, the ancient vision of peace on earth, goodwill toward men. That must always be our goal, and the righteousness of our cause must always underlie our strength. For, as it was written long ago, except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. Number 6. A regular FDR speech would have been an unofficial goodbye. Speaking of presidents and dying, FDR had a speech ready to go for Jefferson Day 1945 before a massive cerebral hemorrhage changed his plans. Had he lived to give it, it would have probably been remembered as a decent but generic speech, the sort of remarks the president needs to make when there's a war going on. But with FDR kicking the bucket and World War II ending not long after his death, his unspoken words serve as an unintentional goodbye to the American people and the world. They have a poignancy that would be lacking had he lived to speak them, and they make a fitting eulogy for the end of both the longest presidency in American history and a historical era of depression and war. There's an optimism to the speech, as it looks forward to the time of peace that everyone knows is slowly but surely coming. And here's an excerpt. Today we move against the terrible scourge of war. As we go forward to the greatest contribution that any generation of human beings can make in this world, the continuation of lasting peace, I ask you to keep up your faith. I measure the sound, solid achievements that can be made at this time by the straight edge of your own confidence and your resolve. And to you and all Americans who dedicate themselves with us to the making of an abiding peace, I say, the only limit to our realization of tomorrow will be our doubts of today. Let us move forward with strong and active faith. Number 5. The Cold War goes hot. The Cuban Missile Crisis ended about as well as anything called a missile crisis possibly could. The US publicly won a game of nuclear chicken. The Soviet Union privately achieved a strategic goal by having US missiles removed from Turkey, and nobody got blown up. It's the sort of feel-good ending that was tailor-made for Hollywood. Most alternative solutions to the crisis would have ended with shots being fired, and JFK had a speech ready to go in case he felt it necessary for American boots to hit the ground in Cuba. We can't even begin to speculate what the fallout of a military invasion of Cuba would have been. At best, American-Soviet relations would have hit an all-time low, and at worst, we'd all be living in fallout instead of dicking around on the internet. On the plus side, it certainly would have been a lot cheaper to take vacations to Cuba. Anytime you can make a decision where one possibility is nuclear holocaust, you better have a damn good speech up your sleeve, and JFK's remarks are appropriately somber. Considering the next words out of his mouth could have been better duck and cover, kids, they damn well should have been. And here's an excerpt. My fellow Americans, with a heavy heart and in necessary fulfillment of my oath of office, I have ordered, and the United States Air Force has now carried out, military operations with conventional weapons only to remove a major nuclear weapons buildup from the soil of Cuba. Number 4. Nixon doesn't resign. Nixon is famous for being the only president in American history to resign, but that was actually option B. Had things gone according to plan, he would have clung to power and his presidency would have begun to resemble the Nixon administration from Watchmen. Nixon's "I'm sticking around, sucker" speech is defiant, although in retrospect it's also ignorant of the state of affairs and a little megalomaniacal to boot. Nixon resigned after realizing the political winds were against him, so it's hard not to imagine this speech being given from a throne of skulls with lightning and thunder crackling in the background. Had Nixon decided to fight public opinion and cling to power, the politics of the day would have become even uglier in a great hurry. And here's an excerpt. "I firmly believe that I have not committed any act of commission or omission that justifies removing a duly elected president from office. If I did believe that I had committed such an act, I would have resigned long ago." Number 3. D-Day goes downhill. As any video gamer can tell you, D-Day was a tough battle. History classes tend to gloss over the many ways Operation Overlord could have gone wrong. Anything from a smarter German reaction to lousy weather would have made Saving Private Ryan a lot more depressing. General Eisenhower, well aware of the risk he was taking, took a moment on the evening before the battle to jot down a speech to be read in case of failure. The speech, which is really more of a statement, is somewhat chilling in how it describes what would have been a catastrophic loss of life with such clinical detachment. So how would World War II have turned out had D-Day failed? Well, by 1944 it was just a matter of time until the Nazis were defeated, but with the American and British advance in tatters, the Red Army would have had to pick up the slack, pushing further into Europe than they did in reality. The end result would have been a much larger Soviet Union and a very different Cold War, changes that would have reverberated throughout history until this very day. So really, we kind of feel that if this had gone wrong, Eisenhower should have had more of a long speech and less of a few seconds of commentary. And here's an excerpt. "Our landings in the Cherbourg-Havre area have failed to gain a satisfactory foothold, and I have withdrawn the troops. My decision to attack at this time and place was based on the best information available. The troops, the air, and the navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone." Number 2. Apollo 11 doesn't come home. Getting men to the moon was such a complicated endeavor that it's easy to forget that they had to come home too. If something broke down, they couldn't exactly call the AAA for help. And considering we're talking about traveling 384,400 kilometers through the vacuum of space in a little ball of metal powered by rocket fuel and slide ruler calculations, it's actually remarkable that something didn't break. The joy and wonder felt around the world at the sight of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walking on the moon would have been a bit dampened had it then been announced that their adventure had unexpectedly become a one-way trip. Presidential speechwriter William Safire knew the White House had to be ready for anything, so he prepared a short speech entitled "In the Event of Moon Disaster." Thankfully, it never had to be given, but it's a beautiful piece of prose that would have served as a fitting tribute to the men laying their lives down for the cause of exploration, dampened only slightly by the fact that it would have been read by Richard Nixon. And here's an excerpt. "For every human being who looks up at the moon in the nights to come will know that there is some corner of another world that is forever mankind." Number 1. Hitler gets blown up. As that Tom Cruise movie, and maybe history class taught you, in 1944 there was a failed attempt by members of the German resistance to assassinate Hitler. Had the attempt succeeded, Karl Friedrich Gödel, one of the conspirators and the proposed chancellor of post-Hitler Germany, would have given a fiery radio address denouncing Hitler and his policies. Unfortunately, Hitler survived the assassination attempt with everything but his trousers intact, and Gödel and his fellow conspirators were quickly rounded up. Nearly 5,000 people were executed in the aftermath, essentially putting an end to all organized anti-Nazi resistance within Germany. It's hard to say what would have happened had the plan succeeded. Internal German politics were complicated, and many of the conspirators still held anti-Semitic views. But regardless of the details, it's likely that signing a peace treaty would have been a priority. World War II would have come to an end early in Europe, and there would have been no Berlin Wall. But then, David Hasselhoff wouldn't have been able to play a concert there, so maybe it's all for the best. And here's an excerpt. "We would not be worthy of our fathers. We would earn the contempt of our children if we lacked the courage to do everything conceivable to avert the terrible peril and to achieve self-respect once more. Over and over, Hitler has violated the oath given to the people 10 years ago. He has done so by violating the law, human and divine. Therefore, no soldier, no official, no single citizen is bound to him by oath any longer." So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up below, and don't forget to subscribe. We've got brand new videos just like this every day of the week. If you're looking for something else to watch though, why not check out some other videos from the channel linked to on the screen now. And as always, Thank you for watching.